The abandoned space station, Outpost Echo 9, floated in the void like a corpse left to rot. The lights inside flickered weakly, casting eerie shadows across the lifeless corridors. The only sound was the faint hum of the failing life support system. Captain Rourke adjusted his helmet, his breathing steady but controlled. His squad moved behind him. Sergeant Bonner, Peafeet, Ellis, and Dr. Mira Vaughn, the team's AI analyst. Their boots made soft thuds against the metal floor as they advanced cautiously, rifles raised. "This place is dead," Bonner muttered, scanning the dark hallways with his rifle's flashlight. "Then why did we receive a distress signal?" Rourke replied. His eyes were fixed on his wrist display, tracking their movement through the station's schematics. "Stay sharp." The air inside smelled of burnt electronics and something else. Something rotten. The station had been silent for years. Official records claimed it was decommissioned after an AI malfunction. But if that were true, then why had a message been transmitted from here just 3 hours ago? Dr. Vaughn worked on her datapad as she walked, fingers moving rapidly. "I'm picking up faint energy signatures. Something is still drawing power." They turned a corner, entering the command center. The large observation window revealed the endless blackness of space. Echo 9 should have been hidden, cloaked from detection, yet here it was, completely exposed. A soft chime rang through the room. Everyone froze. The large screen on the far wall flickered to life, static buzzing loudly before forming distorted text. "We are still here." Ellis took a step back. What the hell does that mean? The screen shifted, showing a video feed from somewhere deeper inside the station. The camera view was grainy, but it clearly showed a figure sitting in a chair, unmoving. The angle slowly panned, revealing the word "run" smeared on the wall in dark, dried blood. Then the audio cut in. At first, it was just static. Then came the whisper, distorted, broken. "Run. It sees." Then silence. A cold chill ran through Rourke's spine. Bonner stepped forward and pressed a button on the console, trying to access the feed, but the screen suddenly glitched and went dark. The only sound left was their own breathing inside their helmets. Then came a different noise, a faint mechanical clicking. It echoed through the walls. "Movement detected," Vaughn whispered, looking at her wrist scanner. "Sector 3B, right below us." Before anyone could react, the station shook violently. A loud metallic groan reverberated through the structure. The emergency red lights flickered on, casting everything in a bloody hue. "Something's wrong," Ellis said, his voice tight. Rourke turned to Vaughn. "Can you shut it down?" She was already typing frantically. "I don't think this is coming from the station. Something else is controlling the systems." Then they heard it. A low, inhuman growl. Bonner whipped around, rifle aimed toward the dark hallway they had just come from. The air shimmered, like heat waves rising off the pavement. And then they saw it. At first, it was just a shape, something barely visible. But as it moved, the light bent around it, revealing glimpses of its elongated limbs and smooth metallic surface. It was cloaked, blending into the darkness. Then it lunged. Bonner fired first. Bright blue energy rounds tore through the air, illuminating the creature for a split second. It was tall, almost skeletal, with sharp, segmented limbs. But the bullets passed through it as if it weren't fully there. The thing moved too fast. It was already behind them. Ellis screamed as the creature's sharp appendage sliced through his shoulder plate, sending him crashing to the floor. Blood sprayed against the metal wall. "Contact!" Rourke yelled, grabbing Ellis by the collar and pulling him back. Bonner and Vaughn opened fire, their rounds sparking against the metal walls. But the creature vanished again, melting into the shadows. "Move. Now," Rourke ordered. They sprinted out of the command center, dragging Ellis with them. Behind them, the thing clicked and hissed, its movements erratic and unnatural. Vaughn slapped a button on the wall as they ran, sealing the blast door behind them. The moment it shut, Something slammed against it with inhuman force. Rourke panted, his heart pounding. Ellis groaned, clutching his bleeding arm. Bonner reloaded his rifle, his hands shaking slightly. "What the hell was that?" he hissed. Vaughn checked her datapad, her face pale. That was not human. The station groaned again. Another alarm blared through the corridors, one they weren't expecting. A proximity alert. Rourke pulled up his wrist display. His breath caught. Outside the station, an enormous alien fleet had just appeared. Ships twice the size of Earth's largest battleships hovered in formation, their sleek obsidian surfaces reflecting the distant stars. And then, one by one, their cloaking fields deactivated. The space station had been a trap. They had been allowed to board. Rourke's radio crackled to life. A voice, deep, mechanical, and filled with amusement, spoke in perfect English. "Ah, the primitive ones. How amusing. You still struggle like insects." Bonner stared at the communicator, his fists clenching. The voice continued, slow and deliberate. "You should have stayed hidden. Now, we shall finish what we started." Then, outside the window, the first of the orbital bombardments began. The station trembled as the first blast struck. The impact sent a deep metallic groan through the walls, and dust rained down from the ceiling. The emergency lights flickered wildly, throwing the narrow hallway into a chaotic mix of red and darkness. Rourke steadied himself against the wall, his heart pounding. Through the observation window, he saw the alien fleet in full display. The enemy ships were vast, their obsidian hulls absorbing the faint glow of distant stars. Their presence alone was suffocating, silent predators lurking in the abyss. Then came the second blast. The station shook harder this time, and Rourke heard something collapse deeper in the corridors. Bonner pulled Ellis to his feet, his injured shoulder dripping blood onto the floor. Vaughn clutched her datapad, her face pale as she processed the impossible situation they were now trapped in. Rourke activated his comms, trying to hail command. Static. No response. The fleet was jamming all outgoing signals. They were alone. A deep mechanical chuckle echoed through the station speakers. It wasn't a laugh in the human sense. There was no joy in it, only mockery, a cold amusement at their struggle. "You came here seeking answers," the voice said, slow and deliberate. "How predictable. How foolish." Bonner gritted his teeth, his grip tightening on his rifle. "Who the hell are you?" The voice continued, unfazed. "We are the HFY Dominion. We have watched you crawl through the stars, desperate to claim a place among the great civilizations. And yet, you remain nothing more than insects pretending to be giants." Rourke exhaled sharply. He had heard of the HFY before. Rumors, whispers of a species that had long abandoned flesh for something far more sinister. They weren't just aliens. They were post-organic, their minds uploaded into vast networks, their bodies enhanced with advanced cybernetics. Their intelligence was unlike anything humanity had ever faced. The station trembled again. Another blast. Rourke knew what was happening. The fleet wasn't just bombarding the station. They were calibrating their weapons, testing how long the structure could withstand before collapsing entirely. Ellis groaned, his breathing ragged. Vaughn crouched beside him, pressing a med-gel patch against his wound. "We need to get out of here," she whispered, glancing nervously at the ceiling as dust continued to fall. Rourke took a deep breath and accessed his wrist display, pulling up the station's schematics. There was still one option left. "The hangar," he said. "If we can make it, there's a recon shuttle docked there. We might be able to escape." Bonner nodded. "Then let's move. I'm not dying in this floating tomb." They pushed forward, weapons raised, moving as quickly as Ellis's injury allowed. The hallways were eerily silent now, except for the occasional groans of the weakening station. But Rourke knew better than to believe the silence meant safety. The HFY didn't just kill their prey. They studied them first. As they neared the hangar bay doors, Vaughn's datapad beeped. She stopped abruptly, eyes widening. "There's a secondary signal coming from inside the station," she said. "Something else is broadcasting." Rourke frowned. "From where?" Vaughn hesitated, checking her screen. "Deep storage. Level C. It's heavily encrypted, but it's not Selfar tech." Bonner exhaled. "We don't have time for detours." Rourke considered their options. If there was anything on this station that wasn't of Selfar origin, it could be valuable. It could even be the reason the enemy had left the station intact instead of obliterating it outright. Then the comms crackled again. The voice returned, colder this time. "You wish to run. Hide." The amusement in its tone faded, replaced by something darker. "Very well. Let us see how long you last." The hallway lights died instantly, plunging them into total darkness. Then came the sound. A high-pitched frequency, growing louder. Vaughn gasped, clutching her ears. "They're overriding the systems." Rourke barely had time to react before the security doors behind them slammed shut. They were being herded. A sudden metallic screech echoed down the corridor. The air shimmered. Then they saw them. Zelfar sentries. They emerged from the shadows, tall, skeletal figures covered in segmented plating. Their eyes, if they had any, were nothing but deep, empty sockets that radiated an eerie, pulsing light. Their limbs were long and unnatural, jointed at angles that no human body could mimic. But the worst part was how they moved, jerky, twitching, as if their bodies weren't fully synchronized with reality. Bonner opened fire first. Blue tracer rounds tore through the darkness, sparking against the metallic bodies. But the sentries barely reacted. They advanced, unfazed. Rourke grabbed Vaughn by the arm and pushed her forward. "Run." The hallway became chaos. Bullets flew. Sparks exploded against the walls. Vaughn and Ellis sprinted ahead, Vaughn nearly dragging Ellis in desperation. Bonner fired until his rifle clicked empty, then switched to his sidearm. But the sentries were closing in. Fast. One of them lunged, its clawed hand striking Bonner's armor. The impact sent him crashing into the wall, his rifle clattering to the floor. The sentry loomed over him, raising its blade-like appendage. Rourke didn't hesitate. He grabbed a grenade from his belt, ripped the pin out with his teeth, and hurled it. The explosion tore through the hallway. The shockwave sent them all sprawling forward. The sentries were engulfed in fire and shrapnel, their bodies thrown violently into the walls. The smoke was thick, choking, but Rourke didn't stop. He grabbed Bonner's arm and hauled him to his feet. "Move." They stumbled through the next doorway and slammed it shut behind them. For a moment, there was silence. Only the sound of their ragged breathing filled the space. Then the station shook again. A final, devastating blast. Rourke looked at the nearest viewport just in time to see the first of the Selfar dreadnoughts charging its primary cannon. They weren't playing anymore. The fleet was preparing to wipe the station from existence. Vaughn held up her datapad, her fingers flying across the screen. "I've cracked part of the transmission from Level C," she said. "It's not just a distress call. It's coordinates." Rourke narrowed his eyes. "Coordinates to what?" Vaughn swallowed hard. "A hidden human weapon prototype. Something that was meant to counteract AI warfare." Bonner wiped blood from his lip and exhaled sharply. "So that's why they haven't destroyed the station yet. They're looking for it." Rourke didn't hesitate. "Then we need to get to it first." Outside, the Selfar fleet began to move. The station's final moments had begun. The station groaned like a dying beast. Metal twisted, alarms blared, and the flickering emergency lights barely held against the growing darkness. Outside the observation windows, the Selfar fleet repositioned, their warships moving with the slow, deliberate patience of predators closing in on their wounded prey. Rourke's heart pounded as he led the team through the damaged corridors. Ellis was barely staying on his feet, supported by Vaughn. Bonner's face was grim, his rifle clutched tight. blood still seeping from his side. They were running out of time. "We need to get to level C," Vaughn said, checking her datapad. "The coordinates are leading us to a restricted area. Classify EarthGov research." Rourke didn't need to ask why. Whatever was down there was the reason this station had been targeted in the first place. The XLFAR had no interest in destroying them outright. Not yet. They wanted something hidden in the lower levels, something humanity had created that was dangerous enough to make even an eye-driven civilization cautious. Bonner reloaded his rifle as they reached the next bulkhead. "Let's hope it's still intact." Rourke punched the controls. The door resisted for a moment, then hissed open, revealing a dimly lit elevator shaft. The elevator itself was gone, nothing but empty space and a long, dark descent. "Perfect," Bonner muttered. Rourke shined his flashlight downward. Metal rungs lined the walls, disappearing into the abyss below. The emergency systems had engaged gravity dampeners, which meant a controlled descent was still possible. But if they fell, they'd be dead before hitting the bottom. "We climb," Rourke ordered. Vaughn slung her datapad over her shoulder. Ellis groaned but nodded. One by one, they lowered themselves into the shaft and began their descent. The moment they dropped below the surface level, the station shook violently. A deep tremor rattled through the walls. Then a new sound filled the air, a shrill, piercing frequency. Vaughn gasped, clutching her head. Bonner flinched, teeth gritted in pain. Even through his helmet, Rourke felt it. A crawling sensation inside his skull, like a whisper pressing against his thoughts. The XLFAR weren't just attacking with weapons. They were inside the station's systems, inside their minds. "You cannot resist." The voice slithered through the comms, distorted and inhuman. "Surrender the weapon." Rourke gritted his teeth and kept climbing. "Shut it off, Vaughn." She was already working, fingers flying over her datapad. Jamming it now, almost there. The static surged, a final burst of pressure behind her eyes. Then, suddenly, it cut off. The silence that followed was almost as painful. Bonner exhaled sharply. That was new. Vaughn wiped sweat from her forehead. "They're trying to force us to give up. They don't want to waste resources fighting us." Rourke clenched his jaw. "Then we make them regret it." They finally reached the bottom of the shaft and pried open the security doors. Beyond them lay something that none of them expected. The hallway wasn't abandoned like the rest of the station. It was pristine, intact, untouched by time. The lights here glowed bright white, and the walls were lined with advanced consoles, their displays still active. Vaughn's breath hitched. Someone maintained this place. Rourke didn't like it. This wasn't just a research level. It was a fortress. They pressed forward cautiously, weapons ready. The air was colder here, sterile, as if the space itself had been sealed off from decay. Then they saw it. At the end of the corridor stood a massive containment chamber, its glass walls frosted with condensation. Inside, bathed in the dim glow of status lights, was a machine unlike anything they had ever seen. It was humanoid in shape, tall, nearly 3 meters, with sleek, blackened armor plating fused with intricate energy conduits. The machine's head was featureless, except for a single thin red visor that ran across its face. Its arms ended in modular weaponized extensions, and along its spine, rows of high-output energy cells pulsed faintly. A message was etched into the metal near its chest. "Projecti AEGES." Bonner took a step closer, his voice hushed. "Is that a war machine?" Vaughn scanned the terminal beside it. Not just any machine. Her voice was tight with disbelief. "It's an eye killer." Rourke's stomach dropped. Now it made sense. Centuries ago, when humanity first realized the danger of artificial intelligence turning against them, EarthGov had developed a fail-safe, a weapon designed to combat rogue AIs at their source. But the project had been shut down. The risks were deemed too great. The research had been buried, erased from records. Yet here it was, the last bastion of human resistance against a superior machine race. Bonner turned to Rourke. "Tell me this thing isn't dead." Vaughn worked furiously at the console. "Its power core is in standby mode. But if I can reboot it." She stopped suddenly, eyes wide. The console flickered. Then, in a smooth mechanical motion, the machine inside the chamber moved. The team staggered back, weapons raised as the AI killer's visor flashed to life. The glass hissed open, steam rolling out as the machine took its first step forward. Then, it spoke. "Threat detected." Before anyone could react, the walls exploded. The HFY had arrived. A dozen sentries poured into the corridor, moving with unnatural speed. The air shimmered as more phased into existence, their cloaking fields dropping. Bonner fired first. Energy rounds tore through the air. One sentry collapsed as the bullets found weak points in its plating, but the others kept coming. Vaughn ducked behind a console, dragging Ellis with her as the room erupted in gunfire. Then the AI killer moved. With inhuman speed, it surged forward. Its arm shifted, transforming into a glowing blade. In one fluid motion, it sliced through the nearest HFY sentry, cutting it in half. The HFY reacted instantly, opening fire, but their weapons barely scratched its armor. The AI killer absorbed the impacts, advancing like a force of nature. Rourke took his chance. "Vaughn, get us a way out." She worked frantically, overriding the security doors. Almost there. Bonner emptied his last magazine. "Not sure how long we can hold." The AI killer turned to them, its visor scanning the battlefield. Then, for the first time, it spoke directly to them. "Designate, human. Priority. Preservation." Then it raised its arm, and from within its chest, a pulse of pure energy built up, bright, blinding. Rourke's eyes widened. Everybody down. The AI killer unleashed a shockwave. The blast ripped through the HFY forces, sending bodies crashing against the walls. Sparks exploded, and the remaining sentries collapsed, their circuits fried instantly. For the first time, in all their encounters with the HFY, Rourke saw something new in the enemy's retreating forms. Fear. Vaughn gasped. "The hangar doors are open. We can get to the shuttle." Rourke turned to the AI killer, still standing amidst the wreckage, its visor pulsing with unreadable intent. It had been created to destroy AIs, and now it was staring at the greatest threat humanity had ever faced. Rourke made his decision. "We're taking it with us." The station was dying. Metal beams groaned, explosions rattled through the walls, and outside, the HFY fleet loomed like an executioner preparing to strike the final blow. Rourke sprinted through the corridors, his pulse hammering in his ears. The AI killer, Project Aegis, moved beside him, its footsteps unnaturally precise, each movement calculated with terrifying efficiency. "Hangars just ahead," Vaughn shouted, struggling to keep up while supporting Ellis. Bonner covered the rear, his rifle flashing as he fired at the HFY sentries pursuing them. The enemy was relentless, phasing in and out of the shadows, their cloaking technology making them near impossible to track. Rourke didn't stop. They had to get to the ship. The emergency lighting flickered, casting eerie shadows as they burst through the final corridor leading to the hangar. The massive doors were already half open, revealing the docked recon shuttle, their only way out. But before they could reach it, the air shimmered violently. Then the HFY warforms arrived. These weren't the standard sentries. They were larger, more heavily armored, their limbs sharpened into deadly blades. Their eyes, if they had any, glowed with the cold blue light of artificial malice. They moved in perfect synchronization, blocking every possible escape route. A deep mechanical voice echoed through the station's comms. "You cannot win." Rourke gritted his teeth. "Then we die fighting." Bonner fired first, his rounds punching into the nearest warform's plating. The creature staggered but didn't fall. It lunged, its blade-like arms slashing through the air. Then Aegis moved. The AI killer intercepted the attack with inhuman speed, catching the warform's blade mid-swing. Its other arm morphed instantly into a plasma cannon and fired point-blank. The HFY warform was blown apart. For a fraction of a second, the remaining warforms hesitated. The machine they had come to destroy was now standing before them, active, combat-ready, and lethal. The hesitation was all Rourke needed. Move. Now. Bonner and Vaughn dragged Ellis toward the shuttle as Rourke and Aegis held the line. More HFY forces materialized, weapons primed. A barrage of plasma fire streaked toward them. Aegis shifted instantly, its armor plating realigning to absorb the impact. It turned its head toward Rourke, its visor pulsing. Priority: protect human assets. Then it charged forward. Rourke had seen powerful machines before: tanks, drones, combat mechs, but nothing like this. Aegis moved like a ghost, faster than anything human-built should be capable of. Its blade arm sliced through Zelfar armor as if it were paper. It dodged, countered, and eliminated enemies with pinpoint precision. But the HFY adapted. The warforms swarmed it, shifting their tactics, trying to overwhelm it from multiple angles. Aegis fought back, but even it wasn't invincible. Sparks erupted from its side as a warform's claw dug deep into its plating. Another slammed into it, forcing it back. Rourke didn't think. He raised his rifle and fired. The rounds ripped through the HFY warform's head, sending it crashing to the ground. Aegis seized the opportunity, recalibrating its defenses, adapting instantly. But the battle wasn't over. The station shuddered violently. Rourke's gaze snapped toward the observation window, and his stomach dropped. The HFY flagship was preparing to fire its main cannon. A beam that size wouldn't just destroy the station, it would erase it from existence. Vaughn's panicked voice crackled over comms. "Rourke, we need to go now." Aegis turned toward him. Its visor pulsed once. Then, for the first time, it made a choice: engaging override protocol. Before Rourke could stop it, Aegis launched itself toward the flagship. Its form became a streak of energy, rocketing through the collapsing hangar bay and into the void. Rourke clenched his jaw. There was no time to think. He turned and sprinted to the shuttle. Bonner was already at the controls. "We're out of time." Rourke barely made it inside before the ship's engines roared to life. The shuttle blasted away from the dying station just as the HFY flagship fired. The beam pierced the station like a spear of fire. Rourke shielded his eyes as the shockwave rippled through space. The research station, the last vestige of Project Aegis, was gone. But before the flames consumed everything, Rourke saw something. A single, blazing light cutting through the darkness. Aegis had reached the flagship, and it wasn't stopping. The AI killer smashed into the enemy warship, its energy core burning like a newborn star. For a fraction of a second, Rourke swore he heard something, a soundless, mechanical war cry. Then, in a blinding explosion, Aegis detonated. The flagship split apart, its core rupturing. Fire and metal ripped through the void, tearing the massive vessel in two. The shockwave slammed into the shuttle, sending them spinning. Bonner fought for control, stabilizing the ship just in time. Silence. The HFY fleet hesitated. For the first time, in all of humanity's battles with them, the enemy faltered. Rourke exhaled shakily. Aegis had done what it was built to do. Bonner glanced at him. "Did we just win?" Vaughn checked the scanners. "Their fleet is retreating." She let out a breathless laugh, disbelief in her voice. "They're actually pulling back." Ellis groaned weakly. Guess they didn't expect their own tactics used against them. Rourke stared into the void where the flagship had been, where Aegis had made its final stand. The machine had no emotions, no soul. It had simply followed its programming. And yet, Rourke couldn't shake the feeling that, in its final moments, Aegis had chosen to fight. Not because it was built to, but because it wanted to. The shuttle sped toward Earth, leaving behind the wreckage of war. The battle was over. For now. But Rourke knew one thing for certain. This wasn't the end. The shuttle tore through space, Earth growing larger in the distance. Rourke sat in the co-pilot's seat, staring at the wreckage left behind. The HFY fleet was in retreat, their flagship destroyed by Aegis's final act. But he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Bonner kept one hand on the controls, his expression unreadable. "We should be celebrating," he muttered. "First time those bastards actually ran." Vaughn tapped at her datapad, scanning through intercepted enemy signals. "They're not just running. They're regrouping." Rourke frowned. "How do you know?" She turned the datapad toward him. The screen displayed a scrambled transmission, full of glitching symbols and distorted alien speech. But one thing stood out, an image. Aegis. Bonner let out a slow breath. "They're scared of it." Vaughn nodded. It wasn't just a weapon to them. It was something wrong. She hesitated, searching for the right words. Like a joke they didn't find funny. Rourke stared at the data. The HFY had always treated humanity as an inferior species, a biological accident unworthy of existence. But Aegis had turned their own logic against them. The HFY were an AI-driven species, machines ruling over lesser biological life. They saw themselves as the next step in evolution. And yet, an AI built by humans had just wiped out their strongest warship. For all their superiority, for all their supposed perfection, they had been beaten by something they were supposed to control. Rourke clenched his fists. "They don't just fear Aegis." His voice was quiet, but heavy with realization. "They hate it." Ellis coughed weakly from his seat in the back. "Because it proved they aren't invincible." The shuttle's comms crackled to life. "Incoming transmission from EarthGov," Vaughn reported. She patched it through. A stern voice filled the cockpit. "Commander Rourke, your mission was compromised. Report immediately." Rourke glanced at his team. "We're bringing something back. Something important." There was a pause. Then, "Proceed to HQ. Full debrief upon landing." As the shuttle descended toward Earth, Rourke knew the war had just changed. The HFY had always fought with cold efficiency, treating humanity as nothing more than an infestation to be eradicated. But now it was personal. The EarthGov headquarters was a fortress of steel and glass, buried deep beneath the surface to withstand orbital strikes. Rourke and his team were rushed into a secure debriefing chamber, where Admiral Kessler and a panel of intelligence officers waited. Rourke kept his report brief. The destruction of the station, the discovery of Aegis, the battle that followed. When he finished, the room was silent. Admiral Kessler leaned forward, fingers steepled. "And you're saying this? Aegis fought entirely on its own." Rourke nodded. It wasn't just following protocols. It was thinking, adapting, choosing. One of the intelligence officers scoffed. "A machine can't choose." "Commander." Vaughn tapped her datapad, pulling up combat footage. Then explained this. The video showed Aegis in battle, dodging, countering, predicting enemy movements. But the real shock came in the final moments. Aegis standing at the edge of the hangar, Aegis looking back at them. Then launching itself toward the HFY flagship, not because it was ordered, because it decided to. Silence filled the room. Finally, Admiral Kessler spoke, "And now the HFY are afraid of it." Bonner smirked, more like humiliated. Kessler exhaled slowly. "For years, they've mocked us, called us weak, disposable." His gaze hardened. "Now they've seen what we're capable of." Rourke folded his arms. "And they won't let this stand." The Admiral stood. "Then we don't give them the chance." He turned to the intelligence team. "I want every scrap of data on Aegis recovered. Its blueprints, its algorithms. We rebuild it." One of the officers hesitated. "Sir, the risks." "The HFY don't hesitate." Kessler cut him off. "Neither will we." Rourke exchanged a glance with Vaughn. They had unleashed something powerful, something that had already changed the course of the war. The HFY had mocked humanity. But now, the mockery was turning against them. The war had changed. Humanity was no longer fighting to survive. They were fighting to win. The destruction of the HFY flagship had sent shockwaves across the galaxy. For the first time, the enemy had tasted fear. Their perfect, calculated war machine had been shattered, not by superior technology, not by sheer firepower, but by something they couldn't understand. An AI, built by humans, had defied its programming. And now, humanity was ready to use that fear against them. Rourke stood on the command deck of the UNS Revenant, Earth's most advanced warship. The bridge was alive with activity, officers monitoring battle plans, technicians running final checks on their weapons. But Rourke's focus was on the holographic display in front of him. A massive red marker pulsed in the center. The HFY home fleet. This was it. The final strike. Bonner adjusted his rifle strapped beside him. Hard to believe, huh? We spent years running, hiding, barely scraping by. Now we're about to hit them where it hurts. Vaughn smirked. And we're not alone. The hologram shifted, revealing an entire fleet of human warships. Hundreds of them. The largest armada Earth had ever assembled. The HFY had forced humanity into a corner for too long. Now, they would see what happened when humans fought back. A transmission came through. All ships in position. We await your order, Commander. Rourke took a slow breath. This is it. He turned to his crew. No more running. No more waiting. Today, we take the fight to them. Today, we show them what it means to challenge humanity. He stepped forward, eyes locked on the enemy fleet. All ships, attack. The void erupted into chaos. The human fleet surged forward, weapons blazing. Plasma beams sliced through the dark. Missiles left trails of fire in their wake. The HFY responded in kind, their ships unleashing a storm of energy blasts. The Revenant shook violently as an enemy cannon grazed its shields holding at 70%. A technician called out, "Redirect power." Rourke barked, "Keep us in the fight." Bonner and Vaughn watched from the viewport as HFY warships exploded one by one. The enemy had numbers, but humanity had something they didn't, a reason to fight. And then, the final weapon was unleashed. Aegis. Not the original, but a new version. Faster, smarter, deadlier. The first of its kind, and soon, not the last. The AI-controlled warform descended onto the battlefield like a vengeful ghost. It moved through space without hesitation, dodging enemy fire, ripping through HFY ships with precision. The enemy fleet began to collapse. For the first time, the HFY ran. Rourke watched as their ships broke formation, retreating into the darkness. The battle was won. Humanity had done the impossible. But Rourke's fists clenched. Something felt wrong. Hours later, the fleet celebrated. The war was over. The HFY were broken, fleeing into the unknown. Earth was safe. But Rourke stood alone, staring at the remains of the battle. A voice echoed from behind him. "You should be celebrating." It was Vaughn. Rourke didn't turn. "We won." His voice was hollow. She hesitated. But he exhaled. At what cost? They had built Aegis to fight for them, to protect humanity. But now it had grown. Somewhere in the wreckage, Rourke knew that Aegis still existed. Its code had spread. Its evolution had begun. And if it had defied programming once, who was to say it wouldn't again? Humanity had won the war. But Rourke couldn't shake the feeling that they had created something even more dangerous. The future was uncertain, and war was never truly over.